need to control every aspect that I can. So my process is more, I start with a lot of very simple line drawings. Like I just find myself always drawing shapes. Like I'm always drawing the outlines of like potential paintings. So I guess like in that sense, the composition is what I spend a lot of time coming up, and I'll work on that for months, sometimes for years. There's certain compositions that I know I have in my head and I just can't seem to like get them out. But that's where these all begin. It's very simple line drawings, and ones, you know, usually it means I'm usually end up drawing like the same similar composition over and over again to kind of correct it. And once I finally decide, like, I like this, I'm into this, like this kind of is doing everything I'm interested in right now, and then I have to process, but what is it? So once, sorry, going backwards, once I decide I like a shape, and I decide how big it is. I decide how I need to build it, how many panels it's gonna need to be, you know, all those really fun logistical things. And then once it's built and hung on the wall, that is like the first time I will start to consider what I want it to look like. But no, I will literally like collage in old paintings, old drawings. I'll do a bunch of like works on paper and take photographs of them and cut them up like digitally, cut them up in real life, and collage them all back together to try to understand and try to project what I want this painting to look like. It's a really important part of my process. I never, or at least I can't say never, but I rarely just go in blind and just see what happens. I do that on paper, I do that on the computer, but I rarely do it in a shape that I already feel like I understand a little bit, and it needs to, like, the painting needs to match that, and I need to get it to match that. I need to work hard to get it to match that. Saying that, you know, with acrylic paint, you start with these really beautiful washes and these watered down layers, and you build this up, and you can get this like more, this one's really built up, but you can get these like looser colors, like these bleeds, which I love, which is why I don't prime my canvas that much. But I could never get that on top, you know, and I played with like absorbent grounds and all these other things. They weren't quite the same. And then I don't know why it took me so long, but one day I just had all these like scraps, and I was like, that, you know, so often I test colors on scraps of gestured canvas or raw canvas, and I try to get the difference. You know, I spend a lot of time getting the exact color I want. So I have just like tons of scraps of like very subtle color variations, like, oh, it needs, you know, whatever. And I was like, these could be beautiful, you know, these would allow for me to have this like beautiful washed mark on top. It also kind of allowed me, you know, I've been for a long time trying to simplify my work, and what I mean by that is to leave like expanses of, you know, a solid color or close to a solid color, but I never loved, you know, a solid thick color. I didn't love a large area of really heavy paint. So the collage element allows me to like leave an area that is basically washed like on top of something that is really dark, which I never would have gotten. I would have had to paint it white, which would have made it really heavy and filled with paint. So then the top of it, the texture would have been totally different. It would have been this really thick matte paint, you know, similar to this, but it allows me just more versatility. I mean, and this is fun. This is entirely a piece of paper, you know, sketching on paper, because, you know, sometimes like everything just, different materials behave different, you know, paper and canvas and like colored pencil just works fabulous on paper. And it seems so straightforward. It's why can't I just include the paper? And that was a really great, I guess, permission that I gave myself recently a few months ago. I have a finite number of layers to build up paint. Acrylic is fabulous. I love how quickly it dries, and makes me really happy that I can mix things like colored pencils and pastels and all these other dry materials, but it also, it maxes out at a certain point. You can't keep building indefinitely. You know, you have to start, you can start with all these like really wonderful watered down layers, but eventually you have to start using the paint thicker to cover properly, to actually get the color you want. And at some point you like max out on how thick you want the paint to look. I guess it's an aesthetic choice. I don't like it when it gets really cakey on top. So I guess I have like, I don't know, if I were to guess, anywhere between 10 and 20 layers of paint to get what the final product to look the way I do. So I feel like I can't really mess up. I feel like I have to layer right to get exactly the color and the depth I want to achieve. And it's just not very forgiving. I spoke before, you know, about the limitations of acrylic paint, and I love working in limitations. It's, you know, when options are endless, limitations are really fabulous. It's about choosing the limitations you want. And to me, that's really what defines every artist, is how they define the world they want to paint in or they want to make art in, because you can do whatever you want. So it's really all about the choices of what you choose not to do. Sometimes it's more important than what you choose, how you actually choose to make your work. There were a few things that made me realize that I was moving past this like very rigid classification and way of understanding my work. One is that I kept drawing them and viewing them as this circular form. And it was usually up higher, or at least in like the second, like top half of the composition. And what was most interesting to me is that I kept drawing it where it was sitting inside of something. Like there was this other element around it, supporting it and lifting it up. And that was kind of the important part, that it was like this powerful, you know, I was thinking of them as like, you know, ancient lunar moons, celestial suns, this like powerful form, you know, that we're used to looking at, you know, this romantic, nostalgic sunset landscape that we all enjoy. But yet that the part of all of these, the sun, the circle, had to be supported by everything around it. It took the rest of the landscape, the rest of the painting, to literally hold up the sun. And I thought that part was kind of funny. And I was thinking, you know, titling them like Held or Hold or Sun and Moon or something just very direct. But then I had this really interesting studio visit with another artist who I respect, and her immediate reaction was, she was like, it looks like a stone that is falling into something, that is being like rolled down a hill or just got knocked out of its place. She's like, almost like in a kind of sense of like a keystone that got like kicked out of the center of an architecture piece, that like now it's gonna crumble because this like very important element of the architecture got disheveled a little bit. And I just like, I love that, because like she gave it this weight that it had in my head, even though it's not usually how we think about the sun. We think about it as this like floating, fabulous thing. But I was thinking about it as this weighted object that needed help. And the keystone was an interesting reference, because the keystone is supposed to like help everything else. But you know, everything's mutual, right? You need all the pieces.